Again, hello everyone. Welcome to the Voice Gathering Live podcast show. It is your girl, Diamond, and I am here. I have a great show for you. I cannot wait to get into this conversation. I hope that you will make sure first and foremost that you are subscribed to this channel here on YouTube, and you do that by clicking the subscribe button and also clicking that notification bell. That bell will let you know every time the show is live, and we're getting ready to give you a great show. Today is going to be an interesting show because for many of you, we are in the month, for some of you, which is called a holiday, a celebration, and that is 420, right? So I thought it would be beneficial for all of us to sit down and have a conversation about 420 and how it could be impacting the lives of many people on the mental health level. I have a great guest here today. I want to tell you about my guest, who I very much enjoy having great conversations with. I'm going to read you a little bit about my guest. You'll have an opportunity to ask some questions in the chat. If you do watch this show later at a later date and time, that's okay. Still post your comment. What we will do is farm those questions out to our great guest, and at some point he will get back to us via email, or maybe he'll come back on the show and answer your questions directly. But this is a great time for us to come and talk. And remember, to agree to disagree. I'm not here to persuade you in any way. I'm just here to have a conversation with you and just to create the aha, or get you to scratch your head a little bit and just think about what it is that we're talking about. So let me introduce my guest. Before I bring him in, let me just read you a little bit about who's coming in and exactly what it is he brings to the table. I'm not asking anyone to just come on this show and not be able to stand on their word, stand on their education, stand on their professionalism. And this is someone great I'm sure you will enjoy. I'm going to be looking down at a little bit of his bio. That way you can understand why I'm not looking at you. So before we even jump in this individual is very smart, very smart. Alan Shapiro has been working in addictions treatment field since 1987. He is currently in private practice in Bethlehem, PA, having previously worked in inpatient, outpatient, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization, universities and community mental health settings. Additionally, he works as per diem, a trainer at Rutgers University, facilitating a 4-part substance abuse module for the Division Child Protection and Permanency, for many of us known as DCPMP and formerly known as DIFAS, right? I want to also tell you that Alan also has done some trainings with the Fathers Are Important trainings. He also worked in New Jersey Prevention Network, which is NJPN, as a full-time trainer for those pursuing certification and licensure in addiction counseling. He received his Bachelor's of Arts in Addiction Studies from, and I know he's going to correct me when he comes on the show, Avalon University in 1992, graduating magna cum laude and receiving the Karen Foundation Achievement Award for students who best exemplify addiction study program. He received his Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology from Kutztown, and he has a funny story about that, University in 1996. He holds an LPC. For many of you who don't know what that is a licensed professional counselor in both PA and New Jersey, as well as this LCADC, licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor in New Jersey, and a CAADC, all the alphabets, a certified advanced alcohol drug counselor certification in PA. Additionally, he holds an MAC, Master's Addiction Counselor, from the National Certification Commissioner of Addiction Professionals. Without further ado, listen, that was a whole alphabet soup. But trust me, when you work in the field as long as Alan has, and is so hungry for knowledge and education, you continue to grow your alphabet longer than you can write it on a page. So without further ado, I am going to bring in my guest, Mr. Alan Shapiro. So by all means, please help me give Mr. Alan Shapiro a big round of applause. Hello, Mr. Alan, come on in. Hello.
Thank you, Diamond.
How are you?
I'm good. All of that stuff makes me feel very old.
Let me make sure I can hear you.
You good?
Okay, Alan?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I still hear some little feedback. Hold on. We got all this clapping going on over here. Let's make sure we can get that out of here. Okay, Alan?
Thank you, Diamond.
Okay, how are you?
I'm good. Pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me. When I listen to all that stuff, it tells me that I'm old. It's all good. I wouldn't trade it for anything. That was Alvernia University, and there was something else in there. Anyway, that's just where I came from, and 34 years in the treatment field has been fantastic, and looking for more. So, great to be here, and I'm going to give it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I want to make sure that I can make sure we don't have any feedback. Alan, can you say hello again?
Hello.
Okay, awesome. That's better. So we had a little feedback. So again, thank you so much, Alan, for taking this opportunity on your day off, which I don't think you ever have a day off, when you're always helping people in the field of addiction, whether it's you providing private practice services to someone or you're training many of us. And for those who are watching the show, I have attended many of Mr. Shapiro's trainings, many of them. And when I tell you, if you can get a chance to get into a classroom with Alan Shapiro, and I'm going to be calling him Alan. We have that relationship. So if you can get into a training with Alan, you will walk out, I'm telling you, feel so filled with a lot of information that you either said, I never thought of it that way, or I never even considered that. So Alan, I am so glad to have you here. As I told you, I wanted to talk to you about co-occurring issues now we are in the process, actually we're in the time where we were, a state did not legalize marijuana. It was not accepted. Many people ended up getting incarcerated for the use of marijuana. And now we're in a time where they have legalized it. And I think that there's many people who are not really considering some of the ramifications, some of the detrimentals that they may run into now that we are a state that has recreational use of marijuana, and the other part of it is medical marijuana. I wanted to first ask you, just to start this conversation off, what is your thought? Just whether it be professional or just someone living the time now when it's different from legalizing it and not legalizing it. What are your thoughts about the use of marijuana?
Thank you, Diamond. I'm filled with reservations. My school of thought is I don't believe marijuana is as benign as people want to make it out to be. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's a gateway drug. If you smoke marijuana, you're going to do heroin. But, you know, where I'll plant my feet, maybe too strong a wording, with people who want to debate that it's all natural, it's of the earth, and it's this and it's that. I find that it's amotivational. What do I mean by that? When people smoke, they don't want to do anything. You know, even when I have all these responsibilities. And actually, my son gave me a great word recently that I never put into that context. It's a content drug. You know, there may be not a whole lot going on in your life, but if you're smoking, you're content. Or you have all these things that you need to do, and you blow them off, and you're content. So I think like any other medication, we need to take a look at the benefit and burden ratio. Hopefully the benefits outweigh the burdens. And that's going to be case by case. It's not foolproof. It's not risk-proof. There's risks. It depends on the person. Depends on their own history. It also depends on what they're looking for. Does it have some legitimate usage? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no debating that. But again, hopefully the benefits of that outweigh the burdens. The other thing that you alluded to, Diamond, and I'm curious on this one, as we look at decriminalization of it, what about people who spent years incarcerated for possession of marijuana? You know, what do we do with them? How do you save face on that front? And I don't think you can leave out the fact that it's still a money-making issue. You know, there's a lot of money in it, you know. So the government now will be able to funnel all that, you know, the income from that their own way. So it's going to be interesting. I think, you know, time will tell on that. You know, when you introduced the question, you know, you spoke about people with co-occurring disorders.
Right.
If I can touch on that briefly, Diamond.
Please.
You know, I believe absolutely that people are genuinely co-occurring. No question about it. However, I think it's an overused diagnosis. I don't think that everyone who's diagnosed co-occurring is truly co-occurring. Truly co-occurring, okay? Any addict at bottom, okay, is going to be depressed. Do they need medication? Yes, no. Actually, the right answer is maybe. And maybe not, and maybe not. You know, just the concept of bottom itself is depressing. I think here, once again, we got to consider financial issues. Insurance companies would much rather pay for mental health than substance abuse. Why? The high rate of recidivism with substance abuse, they don't want to pay for multiple treatments. So the facilities, you know, Alan comes in at bottom, and I'm depressed, you know, from the situation. And they clean me up, but it's easier to put a label on me of depression and whatever the drug of choice may have been.
Okay.
So, you know, and if you look at literature, and maybe it's old literature, but the literature suggests 30 days clean and sober to really get a read on the mental health aspects. Problem is you can't get 30 days clean and sober, you know, so we're going to put the label on them of co-occurring. I also want to touch on, because in my mind it hits in a few different areas, you know, for our topic, the concept of self-medicating. and here at this point of the conversation, I am not talking about addiction or dependency right now.
Okay.
But I'm a person who tends to be anxious, when I do something like this. So, if I smoke a blunt or I have 3 shots of vodka, I'm good to go. I loosen up, and there goes my anxiety. Okay. However, that can take me down the same road. Okay. I start to depend on it. I start to miss the mark, and lo and behold, I'm into that progression of the disease of addiction. So it can get me there. So, it's all multifaceted, and again, I'm going to fall back on, it's person by person. Some of the pain relieving properties, of marijuana can be beneficial to some folks. Okay. And if I smoke to relieve my anxiety, it's going to relieve my anxiety in the moment, but in the long term, it actually increases my anxiety. So it alleviates the problem, then it causes the problem.
Right.
And one of the things that I think a lot of those who are in love with marijuana usage forget that long-term use, chronic use of marijuana, people wind up feeling depressed, and it's really from the usage itself. So, Diamond, I'm all over the place with that. So, what can we whittle down and fine tune, for our conversation?
Well, the funny thing is, I don't think you're all over the place. You touched upon a couple of things that I'm always thinking about. When we look at people who are, we tore this apart and just departmentalize these situations. I just want to talk about right now, to start with some of the things you touched about, is individuals who now are given permission by the state to use recreational marijuana, right? These individuals now, we're coming up on what many people celebrate as 420. And people has it was this whole thing. This is the celebration. It's the holiday. It's the birthday. It's a lot of different things. 420 come up, and everybody believes that is permission to just, as they would say, spark up and just smoke. Okay. Now, we're talking about those same group of people who've been using marijuana for the first time or for many years, have been dealing with some form of other related issue. I'm sad, I'm feeling down, I don't feel motivated, I'm feeling all of these different emotions, and I have not been able to figure out why I'm feeling this way. Now we are in a time where you are legal to use marijuana, a certain amount, so they say. So now you're going to smoke so that you say you can feel better. But I then scratch my head about individuals who say, I smoke to feel better, when they don't feel better after they stop smoking. So I'm like, okay, are you making the connection that you are using a mood-altering substance? Therefore, the thing that you're chasing, you're getting it temporarily. When you come out of it, you're still not holding on to the feeling that you were searching for. And that concerns me now that we are a state that has legalized marijuana.
Absolutely. No, I think it opens the gates for everything that you touched on. One of my baselines in all of this, I'll say to people, why do people drink or drug? Why do they drink a drug? To change the way that they feel or to not feel. And a lot of people walk around in a state of numbness. And then some people, who've been exposed to trauma, psychically they have numbed themselves. I think, for many, there comes a point in time where psychically it doesn't work, and then I'm ingesting chemicals, to reach that state of numbness.
Right.
So that's another potential in there. As I was listening to you, something that I wanted to touch on also, some of our professional cohorts that I've experienced insist that all the work in counseling is grief work, okay? And I'm not quite that hardcore, okay? But in the next breath, I'm going to say a lot of the work in counseling is grief work. Grieving the losses of what was. Sometimes it's grieving the loss of what could have been. There's a lot of people who growing up held on to a fantasy of what the family, could be like or would look like. And it comes a point in time where they have to give up that fantasy.
Right.
And I know for myself it sounded crazy, but, in essence, grieving the loss of a fantasy, that once worked and helped someone to survive. And because it worked and helped someone to survive, it has staying power. So, again, I know it's a repeat. It's going to be case by case, and it's going to be what they're looking for and how they're using it. A couple of professional experiences I'd like to draw on.
Please.
I had a gentleman I worked with for some time, diagnosed with fibromyalgia, alcoholic. He'd probably be offended if he heard me say that, but there was no question about it. Although I think he got there, but really didn't want to work on that. And did a round with the oxys, was very dependent on those. And when he was able to get medical marijuana, he was in heaven. And he said, he got all kinds of relief. And of course, needless to say, he dropped out of treatment at that point in time. Subsequent to that, I get a phone call, voicemail, excuse me, and on there, you could hear that he was intoxicated. And he was carrying on about the benefits of medical marijuana. And Alan, if you ever need someone to speak to someone about medical marijuana, I'm your guy. Like, okay, not exactly what I was looking for. I want to go back to a statement I had made earlier also, because I think it's a great illustration. It's not as benign as people want to believe it is. The DSM-5, which is the Bible for Behavioral Health, Diagnostic Statistics Manual, has cannabis withdrawal in there. And even just before the 5 had come out, I was working with a young man, and we were working on harm reduction. He had gotten strung out on heroin through the OxyContin and then graduated to heroin. Decided, as his older brother did, to see a doctor for Suboxone and do his counseling with me. And he cleaned up nicely, but he's still smoking pot. Okay. And, this is before legalization. And I was seeing him once a week individually. And one week he had to cancel. Very appropriately left me a voicemail. Al, I'm sick. I can't make it in this week. Put me in my regular time next week. No problem. When he came in the next week, I'm doing my best to paraphrase what he's had to say to me. He said, Al, I never thought so before, but I swear to you I was going through withdrawal. He had a girlfriend who was very high maintenance, and this young man was conflict avoidant. So she got whatever she wanted. I refer to her as a heat-seeking missile, and he would always back down, And he said to me, Al, she started with her stuff, and I was all over it, okay? Because he was agitated, he hadn't smoked in a while.
Okay.
And this is coming from a client.
Okay.
His own experience of it. So there is a withdrawal, that can be supported. DSM-5 supports it. Here's a personal experience that supports it. So I think, everything we're talking about on that level, we need to continue the conversation on a legal level. All we're doing is taking, we're decriminalizing it, we're making it legal, making it more available. I'm of the understanding also that today's marijuana is much more potent than the marijuana years ago.
Okay.
So I think that's a consideration as well. In this. And my understanding, in the stores now, there's different strains and, but I also have seen where people kind of go through the progression of that. One that's kind of benign and a couple of puffs helps them to sleep. One that's a little stronger, higher THC content, then they're getting a little whacked on that. So, again, there's a lot that the individual brings to the table that they may not be aware of, and also how it's going to impact them. Time is going to tell.
So when you talk about the withdrawal part of marijuana, and many people would not consider that, part of me want to say the young adult people, right? They wouldn't consider I'm going through withdrawal, right? I'm not a junkie. I'm not a user. What are you talking about withdrawal? And then you would talk about some people who are older who think they know everything. It says, this is not withdrawal. I'm just a little agitated about something. These are the kind of things that kind of, have me concerned now that we are, again, a state of legalizing it. When you talk about the ramifications of the legal part of it, okay, they're going to decriminalize recreational marijuana. However, I still believe that they're going to actually have some benefits negatively about how to get you on the criminal part of marijuana. You can only have a certain amount of marijuana on your possession, right? Some people who are not really, some of our clients, our consumers, right? Believe that, okay, they legalized marijuana. Well, they also legalized drinking, but you can't drink and drive, right? You cannot be using marijuana and taking care of your children and driving a car as if you were smoking a cigarette and driving a car. You can't do these things. And I think that some of the people we come in contact with, or we just watch social media and the news and all these kind of different outlets, we're starting to realize that they're not considering the factors, the negative factors that's going to come with the legalization of marijuana.
Absolutely. I think, just one man's opinion, that once again, being blinded by dollars. There's a lot of money in it, and we stand to prosper. People are not as sloppy, under the influence of marijuana, as they might be under the influence of alcohol. So I think that's part of the justification. And we know addicts have incredible justification systems. They can justify just about anything. Oh, it makes sense to me. Sounds good, and then they're off to the races. It's going to be interesting, when someone gets pulled over for driving erratically and, they're not under the influence of alcohol, but they've been smoking, and testing them.
Hazardous use.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Hazardous use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then as you said, putting kids in the car. I'm of the school of thought that, parenting, under the influence, they're there, but they're not there. How available is someone to their children? And then you get all the stories. Well, I put them to sleep, and then I get high. And I'm sure those times never conflict with one another. I'm sure they have it down to a science, Or what happens if the kid wakes up? You can't get up. I wasn't planning on that, Or mom and dad didn't hear it because they were so blitzed, So world of possibilities,
It scares me, and it's funny because you use an analogy of, well, I put the kids to bed, they're not up, I'm smoking at 12 o'clock at night, I'm smoking 10:30 at night, the kids go to bed about 8:30, and when I run into my clients, I'm like, okay, I hear you, I affirm that your children are not in the room with you, they're in another part of the house sleeping, sound asleep. I said, but however, this is what I mean about I don't think people consider I'm having a pause here because I'm also going to answer the fact, do I think it's beneficial for people to use marijuana? But I don't think people consider the factors of if you're smoking marijuana and you put your children to sleep. I often ask my clients, I'm like, okay, so they're sleeping, but God forbid your house catch fire. God forbid there's an emergency and you need to save your children. God forbid you're not able to save all your children. Do you ever consider, or if you haven't, consider this? When they do an investigation and they say, well, let's investigate this situation, and they find out that before this situation happened, you have been smoking. Do you understand that they're going to consider the factors? Was your use of this substance impeding on you to the point that you could not save your children? Absolutely. And I don't think people consider some of the ramifications. They just say, listen, you legalize it, I'm using. Now, the other part of that is, I don't want to necessarily say, should you not or should you? I think people should do what they feel is best for them. Right? But absolutely. I would say consider all of the ramifications of your decision making. And does it just impact you? Or does it just impact other people around you? Or does it impact everybody? I think that's when you make a sound decision. And I don't think many people can make that if they're under the influence of a substance.
Absolutely, Diamond. I think the view becomes much, much shorter. Something you just touched on or inherent in what you were speaking to. We've always operated on the premise that addiction is a family disease. Yet more often than not, as a professional, you know this and I know this, more often than not, who do we treat? Individuals. Right. One common denominator I have found across the board with addictions, if it's drugs, alcohol, sex, food, gambling, fill in the blank, okay? The one common denominator I have found is the self-centeredness of the addict. Mm-hmm. It's all about them. and seeing outside themselves, which is what you were saying, is next to impossible. They just don't have that vision, or it's just about me feeling good or not feeling, these uncomfortable feelings, and I'm not looking at that big picture as you imply.
I get it. I absolutely get it. And I think when we think about the kind of work that we do with the legalization of marijuana, and what's to come after that. What will they come after that? It's the green dollar, right? It's the green dollar that I think, I just never thought in my I just could never fathom that they were going to ever in my life legalize marijuana, because we've always heard the negative parts about using marijuana. Oh, it's not safe. It's not this. It's not that. And nowadays, people are using it and don't know what they're smoking. People add other things to it. I tell my clients often, especially, well, no, I want to say especially the young ones, but actually a lot of, it doesn't matter what their age are. I'm saying, have you ever smelled marijuana? 1 minute it smells like this, the next minute it smells like that, and the next minute it smells like this. And then some people, I'm like, well, why does it have so many? Why, when I was a little girl, marijuana was just called pot. It was just pot, weed, pot, right? And as an adult, it's called smoke, monkey. It's called everything under the sun, and it all smell different. I says, have you ever considered why does it smell different? What are they putting into it that cause it to smell different? What ingredients are they adding? Why are people becoming so physically? Some of the clients physically dependent on. I gotta smoke in the morning before I do anything. Before I go to bed, I gotta smoke, and I'm like, but why do you have to do that? What is causing that? And this leads into the second half of my conversation about the co-occurring piece of this. People are suffering with a lot of undiagnosed co-occurring related issues.
Absolutely.
Right? They've been,
Absolutely.
trauma as a child, and think that those traumas have been addressed. They've not experienced it because they don't live in the house any longer. But now they smoke, I got to smoke in the morning. I got to smoke on lunch, and then I smoke before going to bed. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Let's move the smoking out of the picture. Let's start. Well, I'm only here because my boyfriend told on me. Okay, we'll get to that, but let's go back. Let's go beyond. Let's go back, because it's something I might be missing. Now, I know I'm not missing anything. I just don't know what it is. I'm trying to get the client to realize there's something you may not have been willing to deal with that has not really been uncovered for you. Therefore, you had just been surviving the best way you know how. And now I just want to, what do you think that it's going to look like now moving forward? How we work with co-occurring issues with people?
Slowly. I think that's that's the wise guy in me, Diamond. But there's also truth in that, because number one, people today show up with a host of issues. And your analogy was spot on. Well, my partner thinks I have a problem, and then it's okay. What makes your partner think you have a problem? Getting them, and again, one of my bottom lines, one of my groundings,
Okay.
is that something's a problem in my life when I recognize it as a problem.
True.
You may be that professional with the alphabet soup behind, your name, but until I say it's a problem in my life, I'm going to dispute it. So helping them to recognize that it causes problems in their life is doable, but it can be a lot of work. They have all the excuses, all the justifications of why they need it, and I agree with you. That there's some type of pain there that people are suffering. I had a young lady in treatment many years ago, and she was 15 years old, and God bless her, horrific family upbringing, all kinds of abuse, and it was a drug and alcohol case. And 15, and she said to me, Alan, I drank and I drugged to get rid of my problems, and then I found out the suckers could float. 15, and she had that wisdom.
15 years old. Wow.
So now I sober up, or I come to, and the problems are still there. The treatment field itself, and I won't get too global on this one. The treatment field itself, we go to buzzwords, the diagnoses du jour, and different hot topics, if you will.
Okay.
And now everything is trauma-informed care. And please, there's a lot to be said for that. But I also, when I do trainings, people, they want to go right after the trauma. Well, you know what? Timing on that is essential, is key. If I come to you and I have this trauma and, we don't have a good solid relationship, that therapeutic alliance, and I'm still using, and you go right after that trauma, bye-bye, Diamond. I'm going to run. And the
True.
easiest way I know how to run is to a drink or to a drug.
Right.
Okay? So it's gaining that trust of the individual, helping him or her to recognize that it causes problems in their life, and helping them to recognize that despite medicating this problem, it's still there the next day.
Right.
And all of that's going to be a time-dependent process, and as a clinician, I certainly want to bookmark that, but that's not the first thing I want to go after with the client. Timing, again, is going to be essential on that, working your way towards that. They need to know that if they stop self-medicating, that they have the ability to deal with the problem. One of the things I'm quick to remind people of, that happened X amount of years ago. You've already lived through it. The piece you didn't get is the emotional piece. Again, drink or drug to change the way they feel or to not feel. So if I've been drinking, drugging for 15 years post-trauma, I have not dealt with the emotional part of that. I've already lived through it. I've already lived through it. The piece that can happen therapeutically, if you were my clinician, you can help me to connect on the emotional part of that, and that can be my healing. But not if I'm still medicating myself. Go ahead, Diamond.
No, absolutely. And you said something that made me think that the individuals that end up in counseling with you, for the lack of, this is great. However, now that we are getting bigger and the legalization again of marijuana is out there, and a lot of people won't end up in counseling because it's now legal. I think we're going to get to a place that we are a system worldly wide, let's say statewide for now, that says, oh, you smoke like my neighbor drinks, you just smoke, and you have other issues. There's a lot of people who are not reaching the therapist office to deal with these things, to even just say, hey, what brings you in today? I don't think we're ever going to, let me not say not ever. I think there's going to take us some time to get to that point of getting people into the office, wherever the office may be, virtually, whether it's a physical building, because now virtual has opened up a door for us to reach a mass of people. However, if people don't see themselves having a problem, then how could we get the message to them?
There's it's a great question. Right now I'm thinking there's a line in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, and it talks about sometimes John Barleycorn, alcohol is our best advocate. So sadly, what that translates into for me is sometimes they need every drink and every drug in order to get here. So they may have to go through more pain, more difficulties in order to get there.
Okay.
That's the sad part of it. At the risk of sounding punitive, and it is not where I'm coming from at all. But if there's no consequences, why would I want to change anything? So my office actually is a home office. So there's a sign outside with my name on it. No one's driving down the street and saying, "Oh, my life is wonderful. Let me go talk to this guy." If they stop to take the number, it's an accomplishment. So, I think it's twofold in my mind. One, pain. If people are not in pain, they're not going to change anything. And I'd like to add to that courage. Having the courage to address the pain. And to be willing to verbalize that with someone else. Who's not going to judge them. I think those are the prerequisites, for people getting help. Or, Diamond, you already know this, from the drug and alcohol vantage point, most people come in externally motivated. Someone's boot print, where. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Either gender, spouse says, you keep doing this, you're going to be divorced.
Absolutely. I
Boss
agree.
says you better do something, or you're gonna be unemployed. Doctor says if you don't do something, you're gonna die. Okay. Legal system, I think less, excuse me, did in years gone by. But hey, Alan, you can sit in a jail cell for 6 months, or you can go see Diamond twice a week. Diamond, I'm so glad to meet you. What do
Welcome.
I need to do? So but as a clinician, you already know this. Even if it's the wrong reason, the wrong motivation, at least it got me there. Then the work begins for you or I as the clinician. To embrace that person and then try and redirect it and help them to see that there's something in it for them. I feel like I gave you something, but I didn't touch on the mental health part of it per se. Um, I think a lot of people, based on their childhood experiences and growing up, live with kind of a low grade depression that
Hmm.
there's just, a dysphoria, a dysthymia, which really don't necessitate medication. But there's just not a whole lot of pleasure or happiness. If I grew up, example, in a alcoholic home and periodically there was physical violence, I was afraid to be happy. There wasn't a lot of joy in the household. So that's what I want to carry forward with me. It's going to be difficult for me to achieve elation or be real happy. And that looks like depression. There's no question about it.
Hmm.
Specific to the anxiety, nothing new in what I'm about to say, but anxiety truly is a condition of living. I am of the school of thought, and it's certainly not original. We all experience anxiety. We don't all experience it the same way, and compassionately, for some it's debilitating, and for others it's minimal. But just the fact that I have some anxiety, I think one of the worst things someone can do is I start to recognize, well, I have some anxiety. Let's say it's a 4 on a 1 to 10 scale. And in my head, I say to myself, oh my God, I shouldn't feel this way. I just took that 4 and bumped it up to about an 8, with telling myself I shouldn't feel this way, as opposed to, okay, what's going on? Why am I anxious? What do I need to do? How can I relax? It's like, I got this anxiety, and now I'm just amping it up. Currently I'm working with a woman, I finally said to her, I said, what would it be like for you if you didn't have anything to worry about?
Hmm.
Because as soon as you offer one solution, there's 5 more problems.
Absolutely.
Just attached to that anxiety. So it's again, it's a repeat, but it's case by case. And working with people. As simple as what I'm going to say is, I find it to be true. A lot of it is people giving themselves permission to fill in the blank, permission to not be anxious, permission to be happy, permission to enjoy themselves. I'm not going to say permission to smoke. As you said earlier, that's going to be case by case, of course.
Right.
But short of that, yeah, it's allowing myself to feel better, allowing myself to feel differently. So
It's so funny. I'm looking over here at the chats, and I'm looking at the comments, and we have, and I want to make sure I'm seeing the person's name right. I've never recognized this person coming to the show. Um, wow, and had a lot to say. We have questions. If weed is used as for medicinal purposes, why should it be? Why is it bad to smoke recreational? So let's just go back there again. Again, if weed is used for medicinal purposes, why is it bad to smoke recreational? Alan, do you want to take that question?
sure. One of the first things I said when we opened up earlier is it's going to be case by case. If it's truly recreational and it's not imposing on any other areas of my life, so be it. All's well. But the challenge is to recognize that that's truly the case, not the person just rationalizing or justifying it. There are people who can use recreationally.
Mm,
Not everyone, but I will also say in the next breath, many an addict wishes that they could use socially or recreationally. and that's purely a fantasy once they've crossed over that line. So, I apologize that it's a repeat, but it's absolutely case by case on an individual basis.
Thank you for answering that. We also have here Canon. I'm so sorry. Sheet. One thing they just said here: misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, according to the research out Rutgers University released earlier this year. So I was doing some background research. It's part of my job to understand addiction. This is how I know Alan. So I don't. When I come on my podcast show, I don't necessarily like to be tooting my own horn because I like to keep the platform open for people to think, oh, she's trying to counsel me, because I'm very passionate about my thoughts, right? So I speak with my hands. My tone may be like, oh, she's trying to convince me. And it's just my passion about what it is I'm talking about. And I tell people, don't jump to conclusion thinking that I'm here to be your counselor. I'm only here to be the counselor to a person who wants counseling. That's my motto. If you want counseling, that is what I like to do. Let me come out and just help you. But I did some background studies and research on it. And there are a lot of research, as the person put out there in the chat, that stated that, it can cause all other kind of issues, especially psychologically, with somebody who's using illicit marijuana or maybe even medicinal marijuana. The question for me, well, actually not for me, for you, Alan, is that do you think we can treat someone who is with possibly a co-occurring related issue while they are using illicit substances? And before you answer, Alan, people understand Alan is our guest, so don't be over there like, well, shouldn't she know this? It doesn't mean I don't know it. I'm just going to go over and defer it to my guest so that he can share with us.
At the risk of repetitiveness, it's going to be case by case. And specifically depends on how much they're using, and what they're willing to do in terms of getting well. Are they willing to address the use of marijuana as something that needs to be done over the course of treatment? Are they med compliant? With the schizophrenia, we've seen enough of the horror stories, when people go off their meds, the risks that they run,
Right.
With that. So I don't think there's a pat answer for that one. I really don't. It's going to be individualized. It depends on the history. If it's someone who recently started using marijuana as opposed to someone who's been using it for 10, 15 years, it's going to create a different dynamic. So there's a lot of variables. In all honesty, in my practice, at times I'm treating people who are using, and they're in the process, or hopefully in the process of cutting down. I'm not seeing them when they're under the influence, but certainly in between sessions, they're not drug or alcohol free.
Well, somebody who does not understand also about harm reduction and reducing, or going from what many of us all drugs are bad drugs for me. I will put that out there. However, someone going from an opioid use to a chronic alcoholic use, which just is worse, to someone smoking marijuana, and if they're taking these gradual steps to going to something for a professional, that is harm reduction. So some people say, well, you're still letting that person come to your program and for therapy, and they're paying and they're still using. But if you don't understand about harm reduction, if you don't understand that if this person has been dealing with depression and they've been using heroin and benzos and all these other kind of substances, right, to manage, which we understand to cope, which we understand is cover the real issue, and they start to smoke, or they just smoke once a day, twice a day, but they were someone who was an IV drug user. For us, we have seen that client, not us as the clinician, but the individual, make progress. They've made some progress in the step to probably at some point dropping all drugs altogether. I'm going to tell you that, Alan, when you get a chance to look back at this show, you're going to see there's one individual in here who has, the chat is full of their comments. So I want to say to anyone who is watching the show, and again, who may watch the show later, that if we don't, because as we, right now, Alan is on the show and we want to just have this exchange conversation, which is what I call the dance, so that we don't have dead time and you're wondering what are they going to say. And we're not able to answer all your questions here, but what we will do is look back and pick out a few of those important questions. And if Alan ever decides to come back on the show as a guest here, he may be able to answer some of those questions or give you his personal opinion, professional opinion, and whatever it is that he can do. I'm sure that Alan will be able to do that. The goal of the show is to enrich those who are watching this show. I'm telling you, if you just walk away from the show saying, I just never considered that. I didn't know that. Oh, wait a minute. That's the first time I heard that. Then you have learned something from the show. The show is not here to convince you one way or the other. You are your own person. You decide what you feel is best for you. However, the information on today's show can maybe help you along your journey. I want to thank Mr. Alan Shapiro so much for coming on today's show. I mean, I have been going to Alan's training for a number of years. I am always the first person in the building, at least in that class. And the second is the instructor. And we get to kind of have a chit-chat conversation. Alan has always been very supportive of me in my professional arena. And when I actually came to him and said, listen, I got this podcast show and you are good at what you do. And Alan is, I'm telling you, take a training, look it up. Before we go, if Alan would like to, I would like Alan to put his professional information out there in case you are looking for a therapist or clinician, or you are in need of a trainer. You would know how to reach out to Mr. Shapiro and get his expertise. But you will find out what I'm saying to you now. If you get into a training with Alan, he's not one to just lecture you to death. He is one to engage you in the conversation so that you can say, I got a question. And he's going to say, I got an answer, or I'll get one for you and I'll give it to you. So Alan, if you want, please tell people how they can reach out to you if they're in need of your services. And that way we can also have them reach out to you at that time.
Okay, thank you, Diamond. It's very flattering, and I'm glad to be here, and I would be glad to return, when that works for you. So
awesome.
Probably the best way would be, Alan, sorry, my website, Alan Shapiro Counseling Services.com, AlanShapiroCounseling.com.
Okay, so you can reach out to Alan that way through his website. Get your information asked there. Alan will be back here at a later date and time. I want to thank everybody who is in the chat that's watching this show. Again, today's show was 420. We are a couple of days from 420, and many of you now have been given the authority by the state. Although we're still looking at federal, and people think, oh, it's state approved. People, but we'll get into that to a later show. Also, please do me a favor. If you are going to engage in any mood altering substance, first consider your mental status. Please consider your mental status, be it happy or sad or anything in between for you. Whatever that is, consider that first. And then make your decision after that. Don't have a cloudy mind when you do it. I want to also end this show by saying, when women become their own best friend, life gets much easier. I want to thank you today, Mr. Alan Shapiro, for being here. To all my viewers in the chat, make sure if you're watching this show, subscribe to the channel by clicking the subscribe button, the notification bell for all notification when the show goes live. And if you want to be on this show live, virtually, all you got to do is send me an email at voicegatheringlive@yahoo.com. I promise to get back to you and invite you on the show. We also have Zoom conference and master classes here. So until next time, I want to thank all of my guests, because all of you in the chat are my guests, for being here. And also remember, be good to one another. That's the only way to be. Thank you again, and I can't wait to see you guys on the next show. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.